Good evening, everyone. Hope you recovered from the Super Bowl. I know they are pushing for it to be a holiday the day after. We should all support that. They had me running today. Huh. Not even a breather. But let me say good evening to everyone. I want to thank all of our community board chairpersons, council members, and staffs who are with us tonight. This evening, the board will receive a presentation from our budget director, Iraq Shanaski. The presentation will review the proposed fiscal year 26 levels of various city agencies and compare them to FY25's adopted budget. 2 weeks ago, our office held its FY26 Queens Borough Board budget hearing. I want to thank all of the chairs for showing up and district managers. I want to thank especially our budget director, Iraq, and his team for all of the hard work they put into our public hearing. Also want to thank the Queens community at large for the testimony, very thoughtful testimony, especially in these days, trying times. Pursuant to the city charter, the Borough Board must submit its budget priorities each year to the mayor, the New York City Council, and the city's Office of Management and Budget. We have a lot of material to cover, so I ask that we please hold our questions or comments until the presentation is completed. After the presentation, the board will vote on its package of budget priorities for fiscal year 26. Michael and the community board team will conduct the votes after our Q&A session. And now I want to turn it over to Iraq, and I want to thank Iraq. He's a little under the weather, but want to thank him for still being here through his challenges. And now
Thank you, VP. Thank you, VP. Hello, everyone. My biggest apologies for not being there. I managed to catch something over the weekend, but you know, the show must go on, as we say, right? And, so let me share my screen so we can get this presentation started. Wait a moment. There you go. Second. And you can see it, right? Excellent. Okay, so let me just move the screen. It's blocking me. There you go. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another year of another preliminary budget presentation. As the VP mentioned, this is pretty lengthy, so we'll try to go as fast as we can and as detailed as we can. But you know, the most important part of this process is to give us time for the chairs and the council members, if they eventually join us, to give us any feedback and you know, include them in the final draft. As a reminder, we're only going to present a few of the agencies. If you have comments prepared for any of the agencies that are not in this presentation, at the end we'll go over them and we'll take those notes as well. All of you must receive the draft on Friday, so I really hope you had a little time at least to look through it. And with that said, let's start. Okay, the fiscal year 2026 preliminary budget outlines a spending plan of $114.5 billion. The tax revenue forecast is $78 billion, which is a 5.6% growth from the previous year. Property taxes are expected to get a revenue of $31.87 billion, which is a 4.1 growth. Personal income tax is $17.02 billion, which represents an 11.1 growth from last year. And sales taxes has a growth of 3.8%, which is $10.4 billion. From federal grants, we're getting $7.3 billion, and from state grants, $19.1 billion.
And let me just go on the record on the federal grants right now, because we literally got guidance today from the law department that some of our federal grants are in danger of being pulled back. So just something for everybody to be aware about, and they'll certainly be in touch with us as we find out what those things are. But federal grants can account for everything. I know I used to chair public safety for the city council. The NYPD gets federal grants. So it's going to be very interesting to watch what they're trying to claw back. And it's no secret that Elon Musk just this afternoon allegedly has said that he wants to claw back $59 million in lieu of us housing our new arrivals. So just something to keep an eye on as we navigate this environment we're in.
Thank you, VP. That is correct. That's why it's very important to monitor news, and I'll continue to do that for the, I guess, next 4 years. And we'll update everyone as necessary when it comes to these numbers. But so with that being said, we're gonna start. I wanna, as we dive in the numbers, I wanna use an example of a mistake that was included in the draft. I hope a lot of you picked it up. As you can see in the numbers presented, it says that it should be in the thousands. Therefore, the 3 zeros that were included in the first chart that we sent you in the draft should be taken out. This is just a little didactic moment that I wanted to tell everyone, so moving forward, all the charts would not include the last 3 zeros, and therefore, in your mind, just make sure to add them in order to complete the number. Excuse me. Another thing to consider is that this budget is that the administration last year finalized contract negotiations for staffers, so there were some increases done, and these are reflected in these numbers. You're gonna see that most of the personal services budget lines are fully funded or even above them for the most part, and this is because of the negotiations and the increases that happen.
That's union contracts, Iraq? Was that union contracts, right?
Correct. And then there was also an increase for managers from the mayor. They were also, a part of this formula. So if you see the numbers are high and things are fully funded, it's mostly because of these reasons. And funds are still not in the ideal moment that we would like to see them. But as always, every year we have, as the mayor just said today in an article, we'll have to do this dance, right? Well, with that being said, this preliminary budget, our agency, the Queens Borough President's Office, is expected to have $689,000 less than the fiscal year 25 adopted budget. Most of this is because we have a budget decrease on other personnel services, about $841,000. But overall, our agency, as of now, has $5.8 million to operate through the year. This really is gonna be a problem for us if things do not improve, because as every year we have this conversation and this fight. Our borough continues to serve our residents with the less amount dollars per capita. This year we're at $2.42 that we're using to serve our boroughs. We have done work on advocating to change this.
Yes.
BP, do you want to mention that?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, and this has to be done through the charter. So we've done a lot of research and have worked with, had a meeting with the head of, Jai is head of Department of Finance. So we've discovered that many of these formulas, this old formula, even as we continue to grow, has to be done through a charter referendum. So it's something we spoke about last year, but we really urge everybody with the mayor's new commission being formed again in the councils to really bring this up when you testify, because we can only change this through a charter referendum.
Thank you, BP. Yeah, because as you can tell for the numbers and per capita support, it's just, it's a wild difference between us and, let's say, Staten Island, which I know they have way less residents, but still, it represents a big difference when it comes to operating our agency. Excuse me. For these reasons, Queens, for this reason and for the fact that Queens continues to face challenges as it recovers from the impacts of COVID that we still feel, and so many other effects after that, and since also the national political landscape is increasing by unwelcoming rhetoric and harmful policies targeting immigrants and refugee populations, it is more important that now than ever that we can double our efforts to uplift these communities and protect them. Therefore, these recommendations are the ones we came up with. They're similar to the last year. Well, they're exactly the same last year because we encountered the same situation on fiscal year 25. So it's increased the agency's budgets to better serve the borough of Queens and restore and increase the agency's budget on the other than personal services line. Thank you. Now we're going to move to community boards, which is, I know, a big part of what you really, really, really want to advocate for. When it comes to community boards, the OTPS budget line, or than the personnel services, is funded $24,000 less than in the preliminary budget. But overall, the agency budget has increased by $62,000. Again, this has to do with the contracting portion of things, um, and some increases that happen through the year. Um, Per capita, community boards have the same issue as our office. You are serving our residents per community board at $1.68. Comparatively, there's let's say the Bronx is $2, Brooklyn is 1.89, and Staten Island is at 178. Again, we see a big difference on the way we can advocate for our residents or serve our residents with the dollars that we're getting. I don't have to tell you how important the work that you do is, how demanding it is. You live it every day and every week, and for these reasons, we recommend that to fully restore and enhance funding to Queens Community Boards. Fund the top priorities of each community board that are in the register. That is attached. Is an attachment in your printouts. Provide funding for live broadcasting services for each community board, and provide funding for an urban planner for Queens Community Boards. This is one of the recommendations that we got from some of the testimonies that were presented at the last hearing. So thank you so much for bringing those matters to us. We're going to move to the Department of Education. The Department of Education does not have a budget cut in relation to the previous adopted budget, but let's remember that agencies were being budgeted to lower levels due to the PECs that the city was implementing during the budget process of last year. With this being said, DOE does not have a big cut, generally speaking, but these amounts that are in the preliminary budget do not account for early childhood education programs such as 3K and UPK program, Promise NYC, and for special education early childhood programs. We're still short about several $1 million there that we should be advocating for. As you can see, this chart will be a little different from the one you have on your books, but I just wanted you to see that realistically, on year 2028, there's no seats to be programmed to be increased. But in relation to that, these are all the seats that Queens will get. It's important to note the 70 AQ that you see in the chart that represent high school seats. With all this being said, our recommendations for the Department of Education is prioritize capital investments for the construction and expansion of elementary and middle schools in Queens. Until we don't see that money executed and that capital plan fully implemented, we'll continue to advocate for those dollars to be invested. Prioritize capital funds for the construction and expansion of high schools, increase and enhance expense funding for Queens schools, increase access to technology for students, create a budget initiative for schools to invest in the creations on hydroponics labs. This is something that the BP and myself and the rest of the team feel very passionate about. We also want to recommend that the city to dedicate funds for personnel for early lease negotiations of building schools. And I'll tell you the reasoning behind this. We have encountered situations where schools are unable to make capital upgrades because they have less than 5 years of in their lease before they expire. So what we've been proposing is to have the OE start those negotiations early so we can avoid having way too many years for schools to do these upgrades. As we know, technology is rapidly changing, and therefore, a year without these improvements, it can, trickle, it can multiply.
And what's the
for
school
way
in
more.
Astoria, I think we have this issue with? So even if we give capital funding, we can't. Is it back up?
Correct. Is that we have like about 6 schools throughout the Queens. There's a few of them in Astoria and others in Southeast Queens. So I can send if anyone wants to know what schools. I'm happy to share the information later on. And I'm missing one recommendation in the slide. My apologies. We also are asking for capital funds to be invested in public schools for schools to repair their bathrooms. We have encountered situations, way too many situations where the bathroom has not been touched since the 70s or 80s, and also continue city council initiatives.
The bathrooms are just, I mean, that has come up overwhelmingly in our budget. We just hosted the CECs borough-wide, and it's really shameful the way some of these bathrooms are. I think, was it Flushing Veritas was in here too? They did a whole budget presentation. I think their sinks were off. They didn't even have sinks, and it's really horrendous. So they really need to, and we're going to push SCA to really, we need a budget line item to upgrade these bathrooms, who haven't been touched in some cases in 100 years.
Exactly. And now for the next agency, Fanny. So while we figure out this, Fanny Lynn is our budget analyst, and she's been stepping up a lot lately. She wanted to have the experience of presenting on the city's agency, so let's give her all the encouragement she needs. She will be presenting for us now.
Okay, hi. So for Department of Aging, the FY26 preliminary budget was $426.1 million, which was $124 million less compared to the FY25 adopted budget. The main decreases in funding is senior services, senior centers and meals, and administration and contract agency support. Next. Arak. Okay, thank you. So these are just kind of the key DIFTA programs. And there was a name change for one of the budget functions, and that was the center and home delivered meals. And that was lumped together with the three other programs, the first three on top. So it's social adult day services, home delivered meal contracts, and NORC. So overall, there has been a shortfall, which is why we are going to be making the following recommendations. So the recommendations for Department of Aging is to restore and enhance funding for senior centers, restore and enhance for senior services. So this is like the borough president discretionary funding that we get. This is like the small pot of money that we get, and we really use that to fund senior programs. So we really want to restore and enhance that. Increase funding for transportation service contracts. Increase funding to ensure senior centers are open at least 6 days a week. And also to dedicate capital funds to renovate senior centers and upgrade kitchens and HVAC systems. So this would really probably help with the home delivered meals if they have upgraded kitchens to kind of make the meals for the seniors, and then also to continue city council initiatives. Okay, so the next agency is the New York Department of Youth and Community Development. The budget for DYCD for FY26 was $1.13 billion, which was $264 million less than the FY25 adopted budget. Several program names were changed, and those new names were bolded. Overall, there has been a shortfall in most of the programs. So the following recommendations that we are going to make. Next. Parag, next. Oh, thank you. So the following recommendations are to restore and enhance funding for all youth and community development programs, to fund universal after school for elementary schools, to restore and enhance funding for Train and Earn OSY in Queens, to increase funding for additional staff tasks with executing discretionary funding contracts, along with restoring funding for literacy programs, and to also continue city council initiatives. Okay, so for the next agency, it is New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. The mayor's FY26 preliminary budget forecasts a $2.13 billion budget for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, and this was a decrease from like 98.7 million from the FY25 adopted budget. Next, okay. And so one of the significant challenging facing Queens is to access to healthcare. And so Queens is already underbedded and underserved. And with the previous year's closures, which have already strained and already overburdened system, Queens is currently has about 9 acute care hospitals throughout the borough and is responsible for serving over 2.4 million residents. So together, these 9 hospitals serve the entire borough. And so so based with like Queens and the per 1,000 residents, we are still lower. And I also wanted to note that in FY26, there was a slight decrease in beds. So in FY26, it was 3,833 beds, but it was but this is a decrease from last year, which was 3,851 beds. So yeah. So the following recommendations that we want to make are is to increase expense and capital funding support for Queens Health and Hospitals, funding for HHC-operated Article 28 freestanding healthcare facilities, funding for a new municipal hospital, funding for more prenatal and birthing centers, increase and enhance funding for food pantries, restore and enhance mental hygiene, disease prevention and treatment, and Center for Health Equity, prioritize and expedite the construction of the Jamaica Hospital Cancer Center, and also continue city council initiatives.
Okay, my turn. So, and the next agency we have is FDNY, the Fire Department. This year, I'm just very happy to say that this agency has no cuts. We only see increases in the other personal services and personal services. This is about a 69.3 million a million increase. The budget, in generally speaking, for fiscal year 26 is $2.6 billion for the fire department. We have several recommendations, though. We want to see, the FDNY personnel funding to be increased anyway, because we need their services constantly. Expand the first response station in Roosevelt Island, which is something that we have been advocating for several years now. Reopen engine, 261 in Western Queens. Create a Rockaway Peninsula Ladder Company. We also want to expand the first response state. That's repeated, my apologies. Expand the number of EMTs and dedicate funds for creating a firehouse in Northern Queens, where there's a lot of housing projects coming up, thanks to our hard work, and also funding generators, because those are always needed.
Yeah, we really want to hone in on, and I had a meeting with the fire commissioner a few weeks ago, and we're really interested in the Willets Point area, being that we're going to have the soccer stadium, more housing up there. So they are already stretched to a degree. So even as the city has recently floated the idea of an RFP for instance, the Flushing Airport, we've said we should look at those areas. Whatever happens up there, we should certainly be looking for an additional firehouse. So it's encouraging to see the budget where it's at, but they need a lot more support.
Exactly. Thank you, VP. Now moving on to the NYPD. I didn't put all the chart that you have on your printout because it's a very extensive one, but I wanted to highlight where the decreases are and explain the financial plan savings portion. So NYPD only has two reductions in the budget functions, about 70,000 for community affairs and about 20,000 for the Detective Bureau Borough Squads. However, the budget line for the Bureau there's an increase of 37.8 thousand. So this kind of balances out the reduction on the borough squads. This other than that, this is an increase of 37.8. Let me rephrase that. Sorry, I'm about to cough. Give me one moment, please. Sorry for that. Yeah. So again, the borough squads, kind of cancel out with the other portion that was allocated to the Detective Bureau. So that's a good thing. There's funds for every budget line to operate normally. Something to note is the financial plan savings here. You see that is usually on the negative, and right now they have a surplus for a difference. That means that they have about 153 million to spend, which means that in the past they have gone over what they're supposed to save, and there will be no overspending. The agency has been overspending.
Or especially on overtime. Especially overtime.
Excuse me, VP?
I was saying especially in overtime, but
Exactly.
Commissioner Chish has been reining that in. And then obviously we now see more classes happening now, right? And bigger classes. So we'll continue to support and in the days to come as we do these job fairs, really trying to get back to the bread and butter of getting people interested in being in the department. And the other good thing this year is we could cross off the 116th precinct finally. That's off the list.
That's no longer in the recommendations, but so the agency's budget preliminary is 6.1 billion. That's about 316 million increase so far. I wanted to share the charts with you. Overall, crime has decreased in Queens South by about 6.8%. And unfortunately, crime has increased on Queens North, but it's not a big increase. It's a 1% increase.
Well, that was last year, though, right? These numbers
Correct.
from right. So this year
these are numbers
really off to a
2024.
tremendous start, and I think a lot of that has to do with the 109, seeing that pilot up there, but a lot more work to be done. But
Correct.
so far, the
thank you.
trends for both North and South this year, we're
thank you
trending in the
for
right
pointing
direction.
that out, VP. These are numbers for comparing 2023 and 2024. As recommendations, we're recommending provide additional neighborhood coordinating officers and increase the number of school safety crossing guards as every year we do. We need to keep getting our children protected. Fanny, can you please take the next agency?
Yeah.
Just grab a mic because we're streaming, so everybody can hear.
Frank Macchio, Community Board 7, representing Chuck Capellian, our new
Yes.
chairperson. There is no notation here about the 109 precinct annex or the new precinct that we were kind of promised. And they started looking for an annex, and they're running it out of the academy at this point. So I think that recommendation should
Yes,
be carried.
I don't have a problem adding that.
Thank you very much.
So Iraq, if you want to add the 109 annex.
Excellent. Shubra, can you please take note? Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. This is Reverend Thorpe from CB12. Due to a conversation I've had, the 113th precinct needs cars.
Okay.
They need cards.
Okay. We
that
can
are
add that.
designated
And
for
we
their
may want to
precinct.
even ask for, because what's happening now too, and we just had a meeting this afternoon with the commander. So we should probably, we'll talk off, well, I guess I can't because we got to vote on this. But we should think about sending additional officers And maybe, the precincts that we have the most challenges in, 109, 103, 113, 115, 110. If I missed you, don't be mad at me, but these are the precincts that we really have an immense amount of challenges in. And part of it has to do with manpower. So we can definitely add those precincts. I don't know if anybody else has a precinct they want to throw out, but those were the precincts that gave me the most challenges last year. Am I missing anything? Right. So 115, 110, 103 for sure, and 109.
Sorry, Mac Merger for Community Board 4, representing on behalf of the chair, Marlena. The 110, she
110.
wanted to emphasize on providing funding to research a new location
Okay.
because the 110 is
It's
pretty
so
much dilapidated. It's a danger. The mayor asked to remove scaffolding on buildings that no longer needed them, and they removed it for a day, and then it came back up, just showing just how much.
So we can add that. That's not a
Thank you so
problem
much.
for us. Yes. Yeah. And that's important for also, just as we see with now our officers can walk into the 116th with pride, it's a real issue for our officers too to have good facilities. So we should push for them. Thank you for that.
Okay, so the next agency is New York City Department of Sanitation. And so the mayor's FY26 plenary budget forecast a 1.9 billion budget for the Department of Sanitation. And this was about a 15.3 million decrease from the FY25 adopted budget. So the critical funding is reduced to these important functions, and it is general administration, waste prevention, reuse and recycle, and snow removal. So our recommendations will be to increase cleanup of major commercial corridors, increase garbage and recycling pickup throughout the borough, restore and enhance funding for waste prevention, reuse, and recycling, increase e-waste recycling sites in Queens, restore and enhance funding for community composting programs, and also to continue all city council initiatives.
Now, we missing one thing.
What are we missing?
Medians. Increase, the vein of our existence, increased funding on maintenance of medians.
All right.
I'd say that again, Reverend Chair Thorpes.
It took Queens so long to get into the recycling program, and then for that to be cut now? And then we're doing this whole thing with the garbage cans?
And we may want to also, and I, they have us purchasing these cans, but we may want to have a byline on there for our older adults who may not be able to afford those new cans. So thinking of a program or to reduce the cost or either give it for free. I mean, I know we're looking at that closely.
It was our suggestion that we give the seniors stickers, just like they had the heavy blue and green stickers prior, that we do the same thing for the seniors again. Because now you're telling people that you have to have it now, that's a $45 can, and then in 2026, you have to have the one with the sanitation logo
Right,
on it.
right.
What sense does that make?
Right. No, I'm in total alignment, but we'll make it plain because I do know that they are looking at some sort of program for our older adults. So I want to just stay on that, but it doesn't mean we can't fight.
And Mr. BP, can you be laser focused on that? Let me piggyback on what Reverend Thorns was saying, because I've gotten many calls. District Marcus received many calls, and when I have my civic meeting, the seniors are complaining about the cost of
Yep.
the addition for these new garbage cans. So as Reverend Thorns was saying, if we put a sticker on the existing cans, they have something to help to assist the seniors. So I just want to piggyback on what Reverend Thorns. This is Brian Block, CB 13. Thank you.
Okay, we will make note and revise it and put in the recommendations.
Yeah, and something I want to point out regarding the composting program, there's a chart that we included on the draft that you have. that talks about how much trash and recycling or non-organic or organic materials are we diverting from the general, or trash collection, and we're not even close to where we should. Therefore, what you're all saying is super important. That's why we cannot cut these programs right now. Moving into the next agency, we have the Department of Transportation. The mayor's fiscal year 26 preliminary budget forecast 1.46 billion budget for the Department of Transportation. This is an increase of 16.2 million from the fiscal year 25 adopted budget. Ferry administration and surface transit have a 28.5 million shortfall, and traffic planning, safety, and administration has a shortfall of 130,000. Therefore, we have the following recommendations. These are recommendations that are, for the most part, similar or the same as last year. Increase the number of slow zones, install more pedestrian and countdown crosswalk signals, and with implementation, expedite the implementation of daylight measures to heavy transit zones in Queens, create more open streets, increase capital funds to resurface streets, sidewalks, and curbs, repair or build new seawalls and bulkheads, invest capital funding to create and improve protected bike lanes, dedicate funding to complete more traffic light studies to help alleviate congested traffic, and continue city council initiatives. Now, moving to one of the agencies that every year it's a lot of push and a lot of back and forth is Queens Public Library. This year, the fiscal year 26 preliminary budget forecast 137.5 million budget for the Queens Public Library. This is a shortfall of 2.6 million from the fiscal year 25 adopted budget. This is why it's important. Even though we had a lot of constraints, thankfully, to the capital investments that our office and the city has been making to Queens Public Library. We've been opening new libraries, and you can see that on the numbers, right? You have the first 4 months of fiscal year 25 library performance. Queens managed to increase by 1% how many libraries are open 7 days a week. The total attendance went up from 2.1 million to 2.3 million. And you increase the number of libraries are open 6 days from 90 to 91%. The only borough that experienced some decrease on any of these different elements is Brooklyn Public Library, which they went from 100% of their libraries being open 6 days a week to 98 of them.
But we still want to get ours up all to 100 if we can. I don't like the 91, but we're working on it.
Definitely.
I mean, I'm encouraged by the 91, but want to get up closer.
Yes, exactly, VP. But it's been a work that you have been. Queens Public Library always say it every time they talk to me. You've been the champion for them in Queens, and clearly, I cannot wait for everyone to hear how many libraries will be opening soon. So that's in the next few years. So keep your eyes open with that. Our recommendations for the Queens Public Library is increase programmatic and operating funding, increase programmatic funding for ESEL courses, and increase capital funding support for the Queens Borough Public Library. They continue to be underfunded when it comes to capital. So, those dollars are very significant, especially because we all know that libraries are not just libraries. There are community centers, there were our resources distribution centers during the pandemic. So there's critical spaces that should always be fully funded and operational.
And it also just shows the power of your voice. Last year, we were facing significant cuts to libraries, but you spoke up. The community spoke up. So we're going to keep our eyes and ears open. But like Iraq alluded to, we have a lot in the queue with them. I wish they move faster. But God willing, we're working with the state to figure out how could we move these projects faster. But I am encouraged by all of the construction projects we'll see in the days to come.
Okay, so the next agency is Department of Cultural Affairs. And the FY26 preliminary budget forecast 164.3 million for Department of Cultural Affairs, and that was an 89 million shortfall from the FY25 the adopted budget. So this is just an overview of all the Queens cultural institutions, and the total amount that the Queens cultural institutions received was 5.8 million in funds. However, this was a shortfall of 3.7 million compared to what they received in FY25. Next, Arak. Okay, good, thank you. So the per capita support from Department of Cultural Affairs for Queens is lower than every other borough. And Queens members of the cultural institutions received 2.42 per capita compared to 11.63 for the Bronx and 8.67 for Staten Island. And also, the average funding per institution we receive much lower than all of the other boroughs. So our recommendations is to restore and enhance funding for Queens cultural institutions, increase funding for cultural organizations in Queens, and also to continue city council initiatives.
Let me say this is key, and I know Evie will talk about this, but this is a big sector in our borough, you know, growing sector, and culture is so important. And we're trying to figure out, I mean, everything you see happening at JFK, we are navigating to make sure arts is front and center in all of these conversations, even through private development happening across the borough. So we really are dependent, and many of these institutions are being stretched. You know, we are building the first children's museum at the Queens Museum, fully funded. So we need to make sure that these institutions really do have the operating funding that they need, because population is only growing here. And a lot of them do this programming for free as well. So this is not like they're getting rich off of this. We need to make sure that we protect the sector. And I want to go to Evie.
One of the things that makes Queens great.
Exactly, our diversity.
I just want to add that, so Queens Botanical Garden is one of the cultural institutions group, but as a whole, we're receiving the same amount of operating funding that we received in 2009. It's stayed the same. And actually, we got a cut last year, right, with the PEG cuts. But so, you know, we're expected to continue to do our programming, all of that, and then our core operating funding has stayed the same since 2009. So thank you for advocating for not just restoring, but enhancing the funding.
Randy,
Yeah.
well, the recommendations?
Oh yeah, I said it already.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so there.
Okay, so next, we have the Department of Parks and Recreation. And the mayor's FY26 preliminary budget forecast 640.4 million budget for the Parks Department. And that was a 22.3 million increase compared to the FY25 adopted budget. So that's pretty good, I would say. But however, there are still more things that need to be done. So our recommendations are to increase the number of personnel in Queens, increase funds for street tree pruning, and also funding for more trees to be planted, increase funding for sidewalk repairs, because sometimes I know like the trees, they kind of uproot the sidewalks. I know that is that is an issue in Queens. Increase capital funding support for Queens parks, along with capital funding for creation, preservation, and adaptation of open space and new parks. Also to provide capital funds to create Boynes wells and other solutions to address flooding problems throughout Queens. Implementing revenue opportunities to fund parks infrastructure and to maintain, and also to continue city council initiatives.
Okay. Once again, Brian Block, CB 13. I don't see funding for stump removal. Is that something we can
yes,
insert?
we should add that. Yep,
Yes.
stump removal. And then also we may want to have something in here. We are making progress on swimming. I forget what the name is. It's Swim NYC. So we want to have NY Swims. So enhance funding to NY Swims and to continue to support efforts to build new pools in Queens, which we have 2 on the way.
Noted.
Okay. Okay, so the next agency is Department of Environmental Protection. And for the FY26 preliminary budget, it forecasts a 1.6 billion budget. This was a decrease of 36.7 million, and the decrease is mainly attributed to a 30 million cut to the upstate water supply, a 7.5 million cut to miscellaneous, and 6.1 million decrease in water and sewer maintenance and operations.
And we need to fight this, especially water and sewer maintenance. I mean, we are the epicenter. Every time it rains, we don't sleep here. So definitely pushing back against this. And in light of what the Trump administration is going to do when it comes to climate, we already know there are cuts. I'm hoping that the new CEO, Lee Zeldin, whose old district encountered flooding, would be sensitive to the plight of flooding for our state and city, but I'm going to hold my breath. So we need to make sure we're pushing back against these cuts.
Okay, so our recommendations are to increase the amount of workers to clean catch basins, increase capital funds for sewer improvements, invest in solar programs and green infrastructure, address groundwater issues, invest in noise pollution efforts, and also to continue city council initiatives.
Hello, sorry,
now-
Mac from Community Board 4. Real quickly, can we amend the first point to include rain gardens alongside catch basins? In our community, most of our rain gardens are massively, trashed upon. They're dried out, and if these are one of the best lines of defense against flooding, and if they aren't properly taken care of, they become redundant to solve that problem. So if we can include rain gardens, that'd be great. Thank you.
Agreed 1,000%.
Excellent. Now we're moving to the Department of Social Services. As you know, the Department of Social Services is the agency, the administrative agency for the Department of Homeland Services and as well the HRA, right? So the Department of Social Services is expected to get a 342.5 million less budget. Sorry, it's expected to get less budget than last year, 342.5 million less than the fiscal year 25 adopted. That means that the agency right now is expected to, or is budgeted at $11.4 billion dollars to operate. Therefore, we always recommend to fully restore and enhance funding for the Department of Social Services. As we all know, these are issues that every community in New York City, but especially in our communities, we're dealing with. We have people who have different types of needs. And some of them have very high needs in the sense that, they're not receiving the support or they don't have the safety net established. So our city has to do more for those communities. With that being said, quickly, I want to put a analysis of the Department of Homeless Services. It's projected to have $328.6 million shortfall. This is the result of the cuts projected for adult and family shelter operations and the general administration. Therefore, we are asking, or we're recommending, increasing funding for the adult and family shelter operations, restore funding for general administration, increase funding for outreach, dropping, and reception services, invest in resources for transgender and gender non-conforming people, enhance funding for immigration service providers in Queens, and continue city council initiatives. Something I do want to point out is I've been meeting with organizations who provide housing, and I'll put an example to runaway youth at Ali Forney Center. They told me that they have experienced a large increase of youth, LGBTQ youth coming to New York from other states of the country because they don't feel safe anymore. They're being, they're being kicked out. They're being disowned, and the need is so high because the last time the funding that was provided, a lot of part of the youth was not included in those funds to be received. So the organizations are trying to advocate for more investment on the homeless youth population. And these are the recommendations for that agency. We put the rest of the recommendations here. Fanny, if you don't mind, can you just quickly go through them so we can just jump into more recommendations from all the community boards present?
Okay, hold on, before I do that, CB2.
Yeah, hey everyone, Anatol Ashraf from CB2. For the shelters, do we have any thoughts about ICE? One of the shelters in my district, a bigger one, was recently closed because it's just an easy, hunting ground, right? So, on the council, my city council person, she said they're working on moving folks to smaller shelters, maybe opening some smaller shelters. So, can we account for that?
Well, we put in, and we sort of kept it vague unless you want to break it out a little bit more, but enhanced funding for immigrant service providers. And I would also suggest we be cautious because we don't want them targeted.
Yep.
So we could figure out, I don't know if you have specific language you want to put in, like enhancing funding for immigration service providers within
And
the
accommodations?
shelters. And accommodations,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, great. Thanks.
But let me say this, I still have 1,000 men at Creedmoor, and I do have a lot of individuals operating within the shadows now, right? Because they're scared ICE is going to show up. Those impacts are being felt even on our college campuses. So LaGuardia Community College, we worked with all the presidents, and we can see the challenges in enrollment both there in the Department of Education right now. So there are unforeseen impacts that we are feeling, and I felt it in 2017. I feel it even more so now. So absolutely, by law, if you come here, we have to house you. If you came from California, we got to house you. That's just the law. So I don't want to see people on the street, and we'll continue to support our immigrant communities every which way we can. And especially since my father became a citizen in 2020, I would never be hypocritical in saying that these people are not, a large majority of them, not what we see projected on the television screen of people getting rounded up for criminal activity. A large majority of these kids that we've met and communities and people we've met on our journeys are people trying to do the right thing, and who are doing the right thing, like many of our ancestors. So I just wanted to make sure I put that on the record as well.
Thank you. Yes. I am one of those immigrants, by the way.
And oh yeah, Iraq just got its citizenship.
Yeah. I just became a citizen a little over 2 years ago.
Got its citizenship. A prime example of that.
Yeah. Fanny, so if you could read very briefly or rapidly the recommendations for the rest of the departments, please.
Yeah. Okay. So, so for the New York Administrative for Children's Services, we want to restore funding for general administration, non-secure detention, placements, and preventative services, increase the number of child protective specialists, restore funding for child care vouchers, and continue city council initiatives. For the housing preservation and development, we want to create and preserve more affordable housing in Queens and also expand community land trust, continue housing support services to residents, that were impacted by Hurricane Sandy and other tropical storms, increased funding for supportive housing, enhanced funding for foreclosure prevention programs, allocate funding for eviction prevention programs, and also continue city council initiatives. Okay, so for New York City Department of Small Business Services, we want to expand resources for small businesses that are still impacted by COVID-19, restore funding for agency administration and operations, restore funding for business, workforce, and neighborhood development, enhance funding for storefront grant programs, and also continue city council initiatives. For Department of Buildings, we want to increase the number of building inspectors for Queens and also fund to help small to medium-sized houses of worship and nonprofit organizations.
So we get a lot of our the houses of worship piece. So because a lot of these smaller, and I guess Fanny, I think I'm running up the right alley. A lot of our churches come to us with DOB issues.
Yes.
A lot, and because they're, these structures have been up for 200 years in some cases. So this enables us to have more troubleshooting for them, and also a lot of our nonprofits as well. Even as we look to build out a lot of new community centers, there still are a lot of nonprofits with challenges.
Excellent. Very well put.
For the City University of New York.
Maybe you can clarify that a little bit,
Okay.
that line, so that we don't leave anything up to the imagination.
Okay.
Because I could definitely see, Borough President is funding houses of worship.
Okay. Well, we'll be.
Which I don't have a problem.
We'll be a little more clear on what that means.
Yeah.
And then lastly, for City University of New York, we want to increase the capital budget for City University of New York Queens campuses, restore and enhance funding for City University of New York, and also to continue city council initiatives.
And with that, this is the presentation we have prepared for
Great
tonight.
job, Lou.
Oh, we have any? Oh.
Thank you. A couple of questions I have. Regarding the education piece, and I know you get most of this information from the SCA, I'm a little concerned in that there's no mention of class size mandate and the need to comply. That's going to be both a capital investment and an expense investment. Also, so that's my first question is why we're not mentioning that, considering it's biting at our heels. Because I didn't see that in the report, any mention to investments for class size mandate, both on the personnel.
More, I think they do have, let me just go back.
Because it's
to that,
hard
so I
to
don't
know,
wanna
because they're
speak.
always
Right.
saying more seats, more seats, more seats. But are these more seats? Because in December, principals had to put their plans in for what they would need individually for each school to meet the mandate, both in personnel and in capital. So what I'm wondering is, does this take that into effect, or is that just
So
forthcoming?
prioritizing capital investments for the construction and expansion of elementary and especially middle schools, I think we can add something in light
Okay.
of the class size law that's come down the pipe from the state. So no issue there for us to mention
Okay,
that.
great. And the next thing is supportive housing. Thank you for including it. We've been prioritizing it more. My only concern is that the city sees supportive housing, at least this is my understanding, is just for existing homeless. And what we have been asking for, and when I read the budget priorities for boards 1 and 2, we all seem to be asking for supportive housing that has a broader scope, looking for people that are neurodiverse, seniors, and so on. So I'm wondering if we could be more clear in sort of who we're including in that supportive housing bucket, so that they understand that we're not just looking for, because we keep getting the same damn response every year.
Yeah.
Homelessness, 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 and that's not what we say. And we're very specific as to the audience we're looking for, because what we're trying to do is we see a burgeoning market of like neurodivergent kids who are going to be adults someday, want their independence, but need the supportive in order to live on their own.
I'm with you on that.
Okay,
No
cool.
debate.
And then the other, let me see, that, and then one more thing. on the sewers, if we could mention pre-storm cleanup, pre-storm preparedness, or whatever, so that they can go through and clean the drains, get environmental protection. If we could put that language somewhere, to not just sewer maintenance, but targeted sewer maintenance that is done prior to storms in problematic zones.
And I was the author of that legislation within Public Advocate Jemani Williams when we were in the council. So we are working on our actual solution because that bill sunset. So I think it's been reintroduced, and I've spoken to the chair of the Environmental Protection Committee to get that passed. I don't have a problem putting language in because that was being proactive, and we had actually got to about, I want to say 90% of catch basins when that legislation was enacted. And then not only that, they had to hire up because we found out obviously there were a lot of catch basins effective. So
Yes.
I don't have a problem putting language in.
Thank you. And the last thing is, I think we would like to start seeing composting enforcement, because what is happening is, we're losing, I know in Central Queens, and I know we're not unique, that we're losing community composting sites left and right, and yet those of us that want to continue to participate are living in buildings like myself that just flat out refuse. They take the brown bin and they use it for their own damn selves. And so what we would like to start seeing is the type of enforcement we saw decades ago when recycling was rolled out, that they start to now enforce it. We're well on a year, I think, into composting, and I think it's about time that we just start cracking the whip and get this moving, because I think it would really help.
I don't have a problem if no one else has a problem.
Okay,
I'm in alignment.
thank you. I'm done. That's my list.
Betty don't want no fines. She's here from Betty. Betty's gonna say, are they really recycling the compost? Betty.
Thank you. Betty Brayton, Board 10. I want to thank the Borough President for the caveat that you put in to the recommendation book that you fully support the priority recommendations of all of the boards. So, that way we don't have to nitpick everything. We all have different priorities, and they're all being supported, and I thank you for that. And unless there's other questions, I'll make the motion that we support. I withdraw that.
The OG. Betty Brayton, the OG.
Thank you.
She
That's
said, I'm
cute,
ready to go
Betty.
home. All right.
Cute. In regards to the shelters, District Community Board 12, Reverend Thorbs, for my district, 27, 28 specifically, we need a more robust opening up of the shelters for everyone. Our shelters now, in the past, they were not migrant shelters. They were just shelters. The community was moved out that was there. They were replaced with migrants, and now everything is migrant, migrant, migrant. And so when people are coming into the community that need help, they can't get into the hotels. They can't get the help they need.
Well, I don't think that's true.
I'm hearing it from them.
What I will say that there
This
is a
how
constant.
they're describing it.
Well, I would disagree because we have we just opened a family shelter in Far Rockaway. So what I would say is there's this continuous concentration, and let me not get started on Long Island City, who's getting a family shelter as well, which they've just been alerted to as well. So I would disagree because we can't, I'm not disagreeing that we didn't see a big influx of 55,000 of our new arrivals, and I'm not disagreeing that Queens is taking on more of the population with less resources that we need. So if we want to go that route, I'm more than comfortable, but I would disagree pitting one against the other because we are seeing family shelters. So she just talked about supportive housing.
I'm just talking about District 28. So what's going on in the other
areas? Part of the challenge we have is that we are an airport community. So where you see airports, largely you have hotels. So yes, you are seeing a larger concentration, and historically Southeast Queens has seen a large concentration as well. But I would disagree in just saying it's the South now because we have the larger bird's eye view on where these shelters are opening up, and we have met with DHS to really get that breakdown. But if somebody is homeless and they go to, and some of these shelters are mixed, by the way, so they're just not all new arrivals. So it just depends on the shelter, and I don't want to pit one group against the other group because we want everybody to have the same standard living arrangements and housing who need the help. So if somebody is homeless, they still go to the Bronx. If anything, what I would suggest is we need to stop having people go to the Bronx, first of all. Every person who comes to New York City has to go to the Bronx and go to their intake center. And I think every borough should have their own intake center. It's a shame that a woman who's encountering domestic violence, for instance, and I've met these individuals, right, has to leave with her kid in the middle of the night near JFK to go all the way to the Bronx by public transportation. So the whole system is broken, and we need to figure out a way to improve it. But I don't want to pit one. I will say I accept everybody, because no matter what, when people say close Creedmoor, I say, okay, well, they're going to say close Creedmoor. They're going to go somewhere in the borough. It's still we have the larger responsibility, right? So we're going to treat everybody the same. And if there are issues as we brought up today with the 102 precinct, the 103 actually, who said a lot of work has gone on. There was one problematic shelter, I think, that had some major public safety issues, and there was just a big bust on that last week where several individuals were apprehended due to gang stuff. But outside of that, he said it's largely been quiet. And it could just be because it's winter. You know, people, you know, they're humans, right? You're going to have.
Has the deputy inspector from the 103 stated to you that they've done anything about the people that are living in their cars around the shelters?
If somebody, once again, is living in a car, that may be by choice, because we're mandated by law to find you housing. So if you could identify those areas, we can
Absolutely.
have what's the name of them? We had a lot of that in Astoria too. We had the trail. We had the
between
the trail.
94th, Waltham Street between 94th Avenue and 97th.
So if you want to send us, we can definitely look at that. We can't listen. If people want to live in a car, they have their right. But they should know if they drove to the Bronx, they get housing the same night. By law, they have to.
I only say that because it's a migrant situation, so I don't know whether they are being bustled around by somebody else, a coyote or whatever. They have minor children with them. They're set up on the sidewalks, and literally they're playing house the whole 9 yards right on the sidewalk. Talk to Dr. Hubbard.
Okay, I'll do. I don't doubt it, but I would also say that people are scared to be in the shelters now because of what we see too. So that's why I said earlier, people are gonna live in the shadows, and if they're scared ICE is gonna move into their shelters, they may move to car. I don't want to speak for these individual situations, but let us get breaking ground. We can get breaking ground.
Breaking ground is not very helpful. Just one last question.
Okay.
From your office, who is the point person for this?
Tarika is running, so we do task force meetings. Y'all missed today, but we had pretty much every city agency there, and we invite breaking ground sometimes too. And I will tell you, I've had my issues with breaking ground, and I've spoken to their president, and have said, y'all got to step y'all game up in Queens. So if you're pointing a place out, we can do a walkthrough with breaking ground. That's not even an issue for us. They'll
Okay.
come at our beck and
problem.
call. Yeah. But I think that's the first step. And once again, it doesn't mean that these individuals are mandated to go into a shelter, but they should know that they have the option. If they want to live in their car, we can't
I get
stop that.
Hi, Borough President. Thank you so much for advocating, because we have so much proposed shortages and cuts in the budget, and you would think with inflation and everything going up, it was shocking to see the amount of cuts. I'm a little worried about the federal grants for education, because I sat on the PTA, the SLT, on the CC, and Title I fundings come from federal. That's a big deal. It affects school meals. All the schools in our community board are all Title I. Yep. You get free meals because of Title I funding. Is there something in place in case this cut? Because the way things are going, it seems as though our president is the only person who seems to be deciding the future of our country and
Elon Musk? Which one?
education and everything.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I was referring to Elon, by the way. So, sorry, but honestly, I mean, as much as, you know, when this is scary stuff, this is real scary stuff. Once this happens, we're losing. I don't think people realize the severity of the schools and the level, all parental engagement, all community activities. Like I said, even school food, it's all federal money. With that being cut out, even if it's cut off for like a day, like the last time, what did they do when they froze the whole system where everybody had to get federal pay for like a day because nobody could figure out? It affected people.
Yep.
We're talking about this affected our children. I don't know what we can do, but I think we already get the least amount of money in Queens. I would never understand. We're the most diverse borough, so I don't understand the cultural programs so big in Queens. This is the one borough that I wasn't expecting this much cut, so it's very
Well,
discouraging.
these are citywide
'cause it's
cuts.
more,
These are citywide cuts in some boroughs.
yeah, and
But-
some in Queens is huge.
Yeah, and let me say this, because I don't want us to also have this like doomsday scenario based on the formula. You know, we are getting a lot of money from the state and city as well, so even though this is reflective of the historic stuff that needs to change in the charter, it's also not reflective of the beds that are growing, the hospitals that are coming, the cancer center and those things. So I don't want us to leave here all with the doomsday scenario, but we do have to hold the fort in making sure that these cuts are not enacted because, yes, you're correct, we're already getting less on the dollar. Even though I believe capital-wise, we do extremely well. You know, the expense side and operating is really need to see more investment from the administration. So as Evie spoke of, her budget remaining the same from 2009. I urge everybody, once again, the mayor has a charter referendum group. We need to all show up. I don't think we understand. If you want to fix this formula, that's what fixes it, right? We got to get the mayor, and it wouldn't just be impact Queens. So now Staten Island, the Bronx, we would have to redo the formula for everyone, and this is a conversation we started last budget, but hope to do a lot more organizing around in the days to come to finally put this to bed. All right,
Yeah, I
because
feel
this
it's
formula
worth
is
it.
from
It's
the
worth
days
it.
of Clear Showman. Let's be clear.
Yeah.
You know, and I would hope that an administration would have the will, because you would have a vote on it, by the way. So, right, so a public this would have to go on the ballot to redo the formulas. So that's what was explained to us by legal and by the mayor's finance people, and it's something we should genuinely be pushing for if we want to correct this formula.
Yeah, and I feel the work is worth it. I don't want to move to Staten Island to be worth more. So I would like
You don't
to
wanna
stay
pay
in
that
Queens,
toll.
and we would get, we get, and a couple more things really quickly. The Beacon program, it's big with the youths. That's a one
We could
program
probably
that should have
did we
had
ask
an
for
increase.
expanding? We should ask for expanding. Beacon program.
Especially the Beacon program, we need an increase. That should not, because, you know, youths need these type of programs especially, and that's implemented in a lot of middle school. Also, I understand we have an increase on the personal services for community board, but
Still need more.
I don't know why we're getting cut from the other than personal services. That covers expense, and inflation has gone up. I would like to see that 24,000 restored plus an increase. Because if anything, you know, expenses are higher up for the
Yep,
boards.
I agree.
It needs to be increased. And just one more thing, the cuts to the community affairs, they're the foot patrol, they're the ones that brings the community together with the police. We strongly ask to restore that 17K that's going to be cut as well. There's an increase in administration, but there's a decrease in the community affairs part.
I agree with that.
Which is the community affairs is the one that really bridged the
And
community.
there's always this conflict between NCOs and community affairs,
Yeah,
but
so
we should
I
have
would
both.
expect more money for the community affairs. So
Love
we're
the community.
asking to restore that fully with an increase. Thank you.
I just wanted to make a statement. I just wanted to introduce myself, Frank Macchia from Community Board 7. All of you know Gene Kelty. He stepped down. Chuck Capellian has been made chairman of Community Board 7, and Gene Kelty is first vice chair. So, yes,
Of Gene,
he's glad that he's staying on with us.
Yes.
We are glad that he is. Thank you. We're glad to have Chuck.
All right.
Sorry, one last thing. I won't keep us too long. On the fourth point of the community board recommendation, it mentions funding for an urban planner. The chair of community board 4 wanted to amend that to specify that we want an independent urban planner. You know, we harken back to the days of the city of yes. We don't want someone from like the government coming to us and not really consulting with us or not being able to give, you know, consult with us and sort of think of something different or new. We want something that's more like apolitical, out of the government.
I mean, that'll be, I'll defer to them, but I think it's tough because that would have to be, I'm assuming, RFP'd out. And even when it's RFP'd out, you're going to have some lobbyist or somebody who, you know, so there will always be sort of this risk, right? But if we can see, I'll leave it to Iraq. I don't want to answer the question the wrong way, but because once you start saying independent, that's government funding. So is it a nonprofit? Are you recommending like a nonprofit who does this work?
Yeah.
And then, you know, at least from my purview, there's not a whole lot of nonprofits that have unlimited resources to do this. So we would have to figure out what that looks like. Evie?
I think some community boards have hired consultants, like urban planners as consultants to advise on like larger kind of rezonings
And you use your funding to do it?
I mean, we haven't done it, but we're talking about it, but I know other boards have done it.
Okay.
Maybe in other boroughs. I don't know if it's happened in Queens, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You hired an independent consultant? Okay. Okay. I mean, if we could do, I would suggest both because they're just not unlimited folks out there. So like Hester Street is a great organization who does this work, but they're not. Oh, they closed. See, they closed in December. Wow, because they were really good. So there's not a lot of, but we could put it. I don't mind. We could add it. Yeah.
Yeah, we could put that on, BP. I had one thing that if we could add to every agency, it is addressing what Sherry said for grants. We could put, you know, something or create a strategy to prepare for any funds to be taken away. Obviously, with a more formal language for each agency, so they can have a contingency plan if grants do fall through.
I like that. Create a contingency plan in light of the
exactly.
possibility.
I can come up with the
federal
language
cuts.
there.
Yeah.
Is that something that everyone wants added to every agency?
Yeah. Yes.
Reverend Thorpe, CB12, I have a question. We're voting tonight on the entire budget for all 404 pages.
Yes.
Okay, how many, by a show of hands, read all 404? So,
I can explain something though. Like 200 of those pages or more, or about
just-
300 probably, are the Borough Board Register, is the documents you work on priorities. So
But
that's
it's
much of this is attached.
And we don't have quorum tonight anyway, so we don't have quorum.
no, we don't have.
So you don't have to
So we
vote.
don't have to vote, okay. So we have until when?
That's a question for Iraq.
The
We have
charter
until
amendments
February
that the vote
26th.
happens by February 25th.
Okay, because it still comes back to, how are you going to vote on something that we haven't all read? So by February 26th?
But I would suggest reading
I'll have the
fast
pages
because
done.
this is, you know, we're laying out the bread and butter, like not much is going to change here.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is, you know, as you go through it,
Yeah, most of it is
You know.
supporting materials that you already voted on, by the way.
yeah. Yeah. But I do reserve the right to, yes, I do reserve the right as the chair to still submit this. So I just want to make sure I put that out there as well.
So you're not going to be rounding us up again, trying to get quorum? correct?
I highly doubt it.
Okay,
I highly doubt it.
thank you.
But we will be transparent Iraq will be extremely transparent on when we're moving, so if you want to read all 404 and you got the time, get it done within a week, minimum, because we don't like doing stuff last minute. And then all of the changes, Iraq, you'll send out the document so you all get this document again. And,
Exactly.
you know, we're not going to be late in our submission. So I just want to make sure I put that on the record as well.
Exactly, VP. I will be sending the new draft with all the comments that we got. Shubra took note of everything, and I'm hoping we can be done with that this week. Hopefully, by the end of the week, you will have the new draft.
So you want to set a deadline, a date? So they'll have their new draft Friday,
Yes, Friday around noon,
which is the
At
14th,
latest.
Valentine's Day. And then, so let's say if it's due the 26th, the 20th, we are submitting this. So you'll have enough time if there are any things or changes you want to make, because I don't believe in doing it, you know, the day before. Is that fair? Is everybody okay with that? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, some of the 400 pages haven't changed for 40 years, right? So,
Exactly.
so that doesn't really affect much. Some of them are from before I was born. So,
We've checked some off. I don't want to give us this, you know.
and then just back to the community board recommendations, the funding for live broadcasting services, I've been chipping away at some of this while I've been on CB2 since 2019. So my dream world would be to create a Queens Borough Hall, like digitization task force that I'd be happy to, you know, help out with.
We just got to find the money, and that's
Yeah.
why we keep stressing we could have and we actually were talking to QPTV at one point, I think, right? To try to see if we could figure out some infrastructure that could really do this. But I'm in alignment with it. I want to get this done before we get out of here. It's been 4 years we've been talking about the same thing. And we have been mentioning this to the administration year in and year out about the importance of having, you know, and because that helps with the engagement too, in a big way. So, so we'll continue plugging along. But if that's something, Michael, y'all want to follow up on, I'm in alignment with it. But most importantly, we got to get the mayor to fund it.
Oh, yeah, I just was kind of looking in the binder at just CB1's capital budget priorities, and there seem to be like 2 priority 1s, 2 priority 2s, 2 priority 3s, and that's how it is on the OMB website as well. So I just kind of want to check that something. Yeah. So.
All right.
Yeah, the supported document we obtained that from OMB's documents. So I'll make sure to look into it with them and resolve the issue with you and short, Evie.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, got it. Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And also, it might be a mistake on OMB's end, but I'll work with them to correct it as well.
Okay. Any other last questions, comments, or concerns? All right, seeing none, we'll be in touch, and I'll see y'all next month. Thank you all. Thank you for your work and contribution to this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Did a good job, Iraq.
Thank you.